Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 3 of my AngularJS tutorial. In this part of the tutorial, I'm going to cover jqLite, as well as how we can modify HTML elements, how to add, remove, replace HTML elements dynamically, as well as custom directives and transclusion. If you haven't watched part 1 and 2 of this tutorial series, you absolutely have to, otherwise you could become quite confused. And like always, all the code is available in the description underneath the video, and you should take a look at it, and I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, just like always over here, I have the Atom text editor, and on the right side of the screen I have Chrome, and I am saving all of this information on a web server. So let's just start writing some code. Now down inside of here I already created the controller, and inside of that I am going to define my directive, and I'm going to call this jqL-directive. And just keep it quite simple. Then I'm going to input some information in here that I'll be able to play around with. So I input some information on some baseball players, so I just have everything set up as a list and then another list underneath of that, and you can see exactly how all of that is structured if you want to pause your screen, or like I said, otherwise I have a link to the code in the description, and of course it's all free. And I can save that and you can see exactly how that's all structured there on your screen. And now I'm going to jump over into my exam9.js file. The one I'm working with here is AngularTut9.html, and just because there's been some questions about it, this is the basic structure of all the folders. I have a top folder, it's called AngularTut. All the HTML files are inside of there. Then inside of there I have a directory called JS, and all my JavaScript files are inside of that. So hopefully that clears up anything you might have a question about. Now over in my exam9.js file, I'm going to start adding in some JavaScript code to play around with this stuff. First thing I'm going to do is call the directive, and I'm going to refer to jqL directive. And just to review from the previous part of the tutorial, whenever you use any uppercase letters like I have right here with jqL directive, over here in the HTML you are instead going to make that lowercase and then put a dash inside of there instead. So now let's just continue writing all this. I'm now going to define function, and then I'm going to say return function, and this is going to receive the scope as well as the element that is tied to this directive, as well as any attributes for said element. Then what I want to do here is show you how to get all of the children of an element that is tied to our directive. What we could do is we could say players is equal to element children, and we're going to be able to play around with all these guys. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tie into all of the children elements of the directive. And what I mean by that is every single thing that lies between this opening tag right here and this closing tag down here. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to create another variable called list of players and just give it no value here to start off. And now I'm going to cycle through all of the different child elements that I have inside of it. So just go I is equal to 0, and we're going to continue to cycle as long as elements exist, and of course I have to increment I. And now I'm going to come in and mess around and modify some of these HTML elements. So for example, I could say something like if players and target an individual player with an index here, and then I could check if the text for that element is going to be equal to Barry Bonds, for example. If so, I can then edit that element. So we could say something like we want to target that element that matches for Barry Bonds, and I could change the CSS color for it. So let's just go color and let's make it red. I could also come in and add an attribute to it in exactly the same way by going attr for attribute. And then let's say that we want to create an attribute called number with the value of 25. We can do that. I'm then going to come down here and also define my controller, and it's called main controller. And I can just say function, and let's say that we want the scope. And then we could just leave that open and have it not do anything. And if we reload this, you're going to see that Barry Bonds is now red. And it's also going to have the attribute of 25, which we'll actually verify here in a second. Let's jump over here. You're going to see that I have a class defined here called thick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add that class to an element as well. So we're just going to get outside of our if statement, and we're going to instead apply a class to the Hank Aaron element. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to say players, and we're going to check if the text in this situation is going to be equal to Hank Aaron. And if it is, I'm going to here apply the class that I defined, the thick class. and I just do that with add class, and then specifically say thick. Reload it, and now you can see that that's in bold, Hank Aaron right there. And basically what EQ is going to do for us is return an element at a given index, if you didn't catch that. And of course, text is going to return the text that is inside of that element. Now let's say I want to list all of the children elements that I have inside of here. Let's just go right outside of the list itself, and let's just define a little title here. So we'll say children in list, and then here I'm going to create a span where I'm going to list all those children. So I'm going to give it an ID of children list, and then close off that span and throw a couple break statements in. Now bounce back over here, and we're still inside of the for loop part, but we don't want to be inside of the if part of that. And now what we can do is say list of players, and take each of the individual players, or children in this situation. It's going to also contain all the averages and home runs and on base percentage and all that other information that I have there, because they are all children. And then let's say that I want to separate all of them with a comma, and then that with a semicolon, of course. Now what I'm going to need to do is come in and select an element, and in this situation I'm going to select by ID because that is how I defined it, children list right there. And then I'm going to add in the list of players that I just defined right here. So how we come in and select an element is we can say Angular element, and then go document, query, selector, and then find the ID that we're searching for. Make sure we put it inside of quotes though, and that's going to be children list. And then change the text inside of there. I can just go list of players like that. And if we reload, you can see right there I have children in list, and then I have a list of all those different individual children elements all separated with commas. Let's go and add a little bit more HTML to this guy so that we can list some more information. We added Barry Bond's number as an attribute. So let's say we want to go in there and grab an attribute. We can do that. So we could just say Barry's number, and again we'll just target a span to put that information inside of it, give it an ID so we have a way of actually accessing it. And let's just call this Barry's number, and let's also come in here and check to see if the Hank Aaron name here is in bold, just as another thing to check. So we'll say something like is Hank bold, and then we'll just name this Hank bold. And let's also come in here and access and display Barry's ID, and we'll just call this Barry ID. And then I'm also going to show you how to use toggle, so I'm going to throw a button inside of here, and I'm going to add a click event to this guy so that whenever it is clicked on, it is going to toggle between being bold and unbold. So we'll just call this toggle bold, and then close off that button. And I think that's all we're going to need to do. So let's jump back over into the JavaScript. Now up here we added an attribute for number, and we added a value of 25, and of course we want to display that. Let's reload this again. See right there is Barry's number. So what I want to do is instead come in here and put the number value inside of there. So I'm going to go first and get the value of an attribute. I'm going to call this Barry's num, and to get a value of an attribute you go Angular element document query selector again, and here specifically I'm going to target the ID of Barry, and then I want to get the attribute that is associated with that, who has the name of number. Okay, so now I got the attribute. Now it's a matter of putting it right here inside of that span that we created a second ago. So we're going to be doing this pretty much the same exact thing here. Might as well just copy this, paste that inside of there. Now instead, this is going to be Barry's number, Barry's num. That's what I'm going to be targeting in this situation. And then if I want to change the text for that guy, I can just go text, and then put Barry's number inside of it, which is the attribute that I just grabbed right there. And I bounced over here, and the ID for this is actually Barry's number, so let's make sure that we have that inside of there. Here we go, we got Barry's number inside of there, and if we reload, you can now see the 25 showed up. Let's enlarge that just so you can see it a little bit better. It's a little bit messy, but you can see it better. Okay, so that's how to get attribute values and set attribute values and so forth and so on. Let's try removing a class. So in this situation, we added the thick class to the Hank Aaron name right here. So now let's go in and remove it. What we're going to do is come in and target that specific ID. So that's Hank. and then we just say remove class, just like you might have thought, and the class that I want to remove from it, and reload, and now you can see that that class no longer has an effect on it. We also have this guy down here where it says is Hank bold. We can go in and check to see if an element has a class on it. So we'll say something like is Hank bold, and then to find out specifically, we'll go Angular element document query selector again. Here we're targeting Hank once again, and then here we're going to change this to has class. Make sure you put that little quote inside of there. So now we have that. Now let's go in and put that information right here, which is going to be true or false. And the name of the span there that we're going to be inputting information into is Hank bold. And then here we're just going to come in and go text, and then we'll put is Hank bold inside of there. And you can see that false shows up, and the reason why it's false is because we took that class off of it. So there that is. We're also going to be able to come in and get the value of a property as well as set a property. So let's go var Barry ID is equal to Angular element again, query selector, except in this situation we're going to be searching for Barry instead, that ID. And if we want to get property for it, we just go prop, and then we'll put ID, which is the property we want to get a hold of. And then we can come in and set that guy. So Barry ID, which is going to go exactly where you think over in the HTML, Barry ID. And then we'll just change this to text. And then we'll change this to Barry ID, which is coming from this guy right here. And you can see that Barry shows up right there. Let's come down here inside of the controller, and I'll show you exactly how to toggle a class. So we can just go scope.unbold, which was the name that I gave this guy over here. Right? This guy right here, button unbold. That's the method we're going to be calling on this. And just like we did previously, we can say function, and then Angular element, document query, and we're going to be targeting Hank again in this situation. And then instead of saying remove class in this situation, we'll say toggle class thick. Everything works out perfect. Reload that, and you can see there it's unbolded, and if I click on this, now you can see it's bold. If I click on it again, you're going to see that it's unbolded. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to play around and change different HTML elements. Now I'm going to create some custom directives and as well cover how to append, prepend, remove, and replace HTML elements. Okay, so now I'm going to be in AngularTut10.html and exam10.js. And I already have a controller here. This is the main controller. And then I have to come in and define my directive. So I'm going to go div, and I'm going to go bb player list. And the directive over in the JavaScript is going to be bb player list, as you're going to see here in a second. I might as well just cut that out of there. And I'm going to say that this is going to be equal to bb players. And then here what I'm going to do is define the item to get from the array. And I'm going to do that by saving it in the attribute named array item. And I'm specifically going to get name. And then I'm going to throw a filter inside of here just so I can demonstrate something else. We'll say uppercase filter, and then close off that div. And that's all we're going to do HTML wise. Now we're going to do a whole bunch more over in the JavaScript. You can see I already went in here and threw in some information so that we can play around with that. Once again, we're going to be able to create this directive. You can see right there it's exactly like I showed you in the HTML. And we're going to do it once again with the module directive method. And we're just going to pass in the name of the directive, and here is our factory function. First going to come in here, and this is going to be the link function, and it's going to link the HTML with the directive as well as the data in our scope. And like I said before, it's going to be receiving the scope as well as the element that is tied to our directive, as well as any attributes that are tied to that specific element. Now if we want to get the data by passing the value associated with our directive to our scope object, we can say var data is equal to scope attributes and bb player list. And you can see right here I have bb players, and over here you can see exactly the same thing. This is what I want. bb players is what I want. Alright, if I wanted to be careful, I could come in and verify that I have an array of data, even though I know I do, and just trying to show you a whole bunch of different things. So you could say, is this an array? And pass in data for that. And if that comes true, what I could do is get the item to display from the array item attribute. Array item is equal to attributes array item. I can go list element is equal to, And here what I'm going to do is Angular element is going to wrap the DOM element as a jQuery element. And we do that by going Angular element and UL. And if we bounce back over here again, so it's basically going to create an unordered list with all this data listed inside of it. And it's basically the UL element anyway is going to be the container in which all of my LI elements are going to be assigned to it. So to assign those LI elements to the unordered list, I just go list element and then cycle through all those different elements until everything is all full. So I'll continue to cycle through as long as I have information to put inside of it. And then we just need to append that information. So Angular element once again. And here we're going to be putting a list element inside of it. Let's jump down to the next line and we'll say text and scope and eval. And eval is going to eliminate the filter that I have over here in the HTML. That's why I threw uppercase inside of there, just to show you how to get rid of a filter if you would have one inside of there. And it's always a good idea because you never know what might happen. And then we'll go array item and data. Remember, we're cycling through all that data. And that's how we can create our list elements. Now let's say basically what we did was it created an unordered list with all these different list elements inside of it. Make sure we go up here and close off that list element right there. And now if we reload this, you can see that all of our player names are inside of there. Now let's say that we want to come in here just so we know more about how to append and prepend and add and remove different elements. Let's say we want to add a span after our list that we have here. To do so, we would just go list element and after Angular element, and then we can put inside of here exactly what we want to show up inside of there. So we could just create a span, and let's say we have the ID for this as maze. Let's just have this be single quotes so we don't have to backslash anything. So single quotes, and then close that off, and then throw text inside of that span, which is going to be equal to Willie Maze. Close off that parentheses, get rid of that extra one, and reload this. And now you can see Willie Maze shows up right there. So that's how we can put an element after another element. Let's say we want to add another span before our list, or another element. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be a span. In that situation, we would use prepend and Angular element once again. And here we can put whatever we want inside of there. So span, and let's give this an ID, which is equal to cob. Close that guy off, and then we can go and put our text that we want inside of there, and we'll just say Ty Cobb, another famous baseball player if you've never heard of him, and it's going to go right up there, and we can reload, and you can see there it is. We could also come in and remove elements. To do that, you can just go Angular. All of this can be dynamic. I'm just sort of trying to keep everything nice and tight here. To do so, you just go document and query selector once again, and then you just say what you want to target. And we're going to target by ID here because that's what works, and we'll put maze inside of there. And then to remove the maze span that we have inside of there, we just say remove, and Willie Maze disappeared, sadly enough. Could also come in and replace an element. So let's go Gehrig. And let's create a span inside of here, just to show another different way of doing things. Give this the ID of Gehrig, and then put Lou Gehrig inside of here, and then close off that span. And now we'll go var, and we'll say something like replacement is equal to Angular element, and here we can use Gehrig HTML instead if we'd like, and then go Angular element, document, query selector, and we'll say we want to replace the cob element with our Gehrig element that we just created. We can say replace with our replacement. And now Lou Gehrig shows up there instead of Ty Cobb. So that is how we can create both a custom directive as well as how to append, prepend, remove, and replace HTML elements. And now we'll take another look at how we can make another different custom directive. Okay, so now we're in Angular Tut 11.html and exam11.js. I'm going to keep this very simple. We have our main controller right here, and then I'm going to have player, and name is going to be equal to Barry Bonds, and then close that off. And what this guy's going to do is pull in data based off of the value we have set here for an attribute. So if we want Barry Bonds information, it's going to go in there. If we want some other player's information, it's going to go in there instead. And with the directive, it is going to come in here and completely replace this guy and instead put in the element that we define over in our JS code. So I automatically went in here and threw in some different information that we'll be able to pull in. And here what I'm going to do is create a directive object. So going to contain all this information, so it's just going to be blank to start off. Now I'm going to come in here and go directive restrict and set that to E. And that's basically just defining that we are going to be using an element directive instead of an attribute, which you saw in the previous example, or a class or a comment. And normally I'm only going to either apply using either elements or attributes because it's easier to figure out what or where the directive was applied to in those situations. Can be quite confusing if you are applying classes, and that's why I personally just don't use them. You're then going to come in and define a template, and the template's going to be filled with the data, and this is going to replace the element over in your HTML. So I'm basically just going to come in here and I'm going to say player, and I'm going to get the name of said player, add a, once again, player dot average. You can see where I'm pulling this information from down here, and we can just go average with, once again, player, and if we want to list their home runs, we could do so. Say home runs, and a, once again, player dot OBP, and that's going to be on base percentage. Have to define a little bit more information. We're also going to have to come in here and go directive scope is equal to, and scope's going to define what is unique about each element. Well, if you look down here, well, all of it's unique, but it makes sense to have the name be used in this situation. So I'm going to say player equal to name. Then we're going to say directive compile function and get the element and the attributes. And compile is going to be called during the initialization phase to set all this stuff up. We're then going to create a link function that's going to receive the scope, the element the directive is associated with, and any of that element's attributes as well, just like before. Here, let's define it in a different way. I'm trying to show you a whole bunch of different ways because you can often see many different ways of doing this stuff with Angular. We said it receives the scope, the element associated with the directive, and the attributes. And here I'm going to bind a click event to this new element that we create on our screen. So I'm going to say element bind, and I'm going to put a click event on it, and we'll say function. When this element is clicked on, we can say element and change the HTML or the text for it. And we'll say something like Barry disappeared when that's clicked on, and then close that off. And then down here, we'll return our link function. And then after this guy, we can return our directive. I don't think I need to do anything down here with the controller. Nope. And if we save that and reload, you're going to see, if we enlarge this a little bit, Barry Bonds had a 0.298 average, You can see where all that information is being pulled from. You can see that the template is what we're displaying here on the screen. And you can also see that the bound click event that we have here, if I click on this, that it automatically changed the HTML for us. So here is a lot of different things you can do in regards to creating custom directives. Now I'm going to give you a quick example on transclusion and exactly how that works. I'm doing this in Angular Tut 12 HTML and exam 12.js. And basically you're going to use transclusion to add data without deleting what is already there. Whenever we were showing our previous examples, we were deleting everything or replacing everything with our custom information, our custom template. With transclusion, you just leave the information there and define exactly where it is being left. So it's a big word, but it's not really that complicated. So let's say I come in here and create a div, and I'm just going to call this exdir, and then I'm going to throw some lorem ipsum inside of there just to throw something in there. So there we go, throw that in there. We're not going to do anything else with the HTML. Jump over into our JavaScript, and I'm going to keep this very simple because transclusion is a big word and it doesn't need to be confusing. So here I'm going to go app, and this is app 12. Make sure I have all this the same. Yes, app 12, app 12. Down here I have app 12. Make sure you have that inside of there. Jump back up here, change that to app 12, and I'm going to say directive, target our directive. Remember, exdir, there's a capital D there. In this situation, it's going to be a dash and a lowercase d. Just a little silly thing that we need to remember. Create our function, and then we're going to return the information we want here, and we're going to say transclude and set that to true. And then here we're going to define our template and where exactly we want our information that is already on the HTML or this lorem ipsum to show up inside of our template, because we're not replacing it, we're just going to put additional information inside of it with it. So let's say we want to create a div and we want to put an h4 tag inside of there, and we want to throw more lorem ipsum inside of there. Let's call this more lorem. And what we're going to do is come down here and say app12 controller. Going to be targeting the main controller again. Function gets past the scope. Close that off. And we'll store more lorem inside of here. And we'll just say something like the amazing lorem story, just to put something goofy in there, and then jump back up here, and now you know what more lorem is. And then we'll close off that h4 tag, and we'll close off our div tag, and we'll create another div. And where you want the information that is already there, or this lorem ipsum that we have right here, where you want that to show up inside of your template, you're going to put ng transclude, and that is going to define where that information that's already there is moved to. And if we file save it, you can see that it worked exactly as we thought it would. So there you go, guys. That is some information on jqLite and how to modify HTML elements, as well as how to add, remove, replace, and do a whole bunch of other things with HTML elements dynamically, as well as custom directives and transclusion. And before I go, I just want to send a special thank you out to all my Patreon supporters. I wouldn't be able to continue making the videos that I do without your support, and I just always want to say thank you and tell you how much I appreciate it. And just like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time,